The funeral home was dead silent when my sister Verena stood up and said those words that would change everything. "My name is Shay, and 3 days ago I buried my 6-year-old daughter Piper. But what happened at her funeral became the moment our entire family discovered the truth about the night she died. Maybe it's God's mercy that some children don't have to grow up," Verena announced to the packed room, her designer heels clicking against the floor as she moved to the front. "Especially those who might struggle with mothers who can barely keep their lives together." Every head in that room turned to stare at me. My own family, the people who were supposed to support me through the worst day of my life, were nodding along with my sister's cruel words. My mother Darlene sat frozen beside me, her hand halfway to mine but never quite making contact. My father Garrett stared at his shoes like they held the secrets of the universe. Even my younger brother Tyson, who usually defended me, stayed silent in his chair, but my 8-year-old son Colby heard every word. He'd been sitting in the corner, holding the video camera I'd bought him last Christmas, the same camera he and Piper used to make their silly home movies. Nobody paid attention to the quiet boy in the corner. Nobody noticed when his small fingers gripped that camera tighter, or when his jaw set with determination that looked strange on such a young face. "Shay was never fit to be a mother," Verena continued, her voice carrying that poisonous sweetness she'd perfected over the years. Even that final night in the hospital, she couldn't even comfort her own dying daughter properly. "We all saw her fall apart when Piper needed strength." The murmurs of agreement felt like knives. My Aunt Felicia nodded slowly, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. My Uncle Roderick cleared his throat and added, "The nurses had to calm her down several times. It was quite a scene. They were talking about the night my Poddle, baby girl, died, discussing my grief like it was evidence of failure rather than a mother's breaking heart." Verena stood there in her perfect black dress, her husband Blake beside her with their twin boys Harper and Jude, looking like the picture of family success while they tore me apart at my daughter's funeral. That's when Colby stood up. "Aunt Verena," his small voice cut through the room like a blade, "should I play what you did in the hospital room?" The change in Verena's face was instant. The confident smirk vanished, replaced by something I'd never seen before: fear. "What are you talking about, sweetheart?" she asked, but her voice had gone up an octave. Colby held up his camera, the little red light still blinking. "I've been recording everything since Piper got sick." She liked watching our old videos when she felt bad. That last night I left the camera on her bedside table so she could see the screen. It was still recording when you went into her room alone. The entire room leaned forward. Blake stepped away from his wife, his eyes narrowing. "What is he talking about, Verena?" "The boy is confused," Verena said quickly, too quickly. "He's grieving and making things up." "I'm not making anything up," Colby said, his voice stronger now. "I watched it this morning. All of it. Mom had stepped out to get Piper's special blanket from the car. You went in when nobody else was around. You said things to her. Mean things. And when she started crying and the monitors went off, you didn't call for help right away." My heart stopped. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Blake grabbed Verena's arm. "What did you do?" "Should I play it?" Colby asked again, looking directly at me this time. "Mom, they should know what really happened to Piper." I couldn't speak. My shy, quiet son was standing up to a room full of adults who had just agreed I was an unfit mother. He was 8 years old, grieving his sister, and somehow finding the courage I didn't have. "Play it," Tyson said, standing up beside Colby. "If there's nothing to hide, then play it." "No!" Verena lunged forward, but it was too late. Colby had already connected the camera to the funeral home's television system, the one they'd set up for the photo memorial. As the screen flickered to life, showing that hospital room, showing my baby girl's last night, I realized that sometimes the smallest voices in the room carry the biggest truths. And my 8-year-old son was about to reveal a truth that would destroy everything we thought we knew about that horrible night. The timestamp on the video read 11:47 p.m., just 3 days ago, 15 minutes before my daughter's heart stopped beating for the last time. The morning of Piper's funeral started like every horrible day since she died, with me waking up and forgetting for exactly 3 seconds that she was gone. Then reality crashed back, and I couldn't breathe. The dress I'd chosen hung on the bathroom door, black and simple, nothing like the colorful clothes Piper always begged me to wear. She used to say I looked prettiest in yellow, like sunshine. I stood in my childhood home's kitchen, watching family members arrive through the fogged window. My parents had insisted on hosting everyone before the service, saying I shouldn't be alone in my apartment where every corner held memories of her. They were right. I couldn't face her drawing still stuck to our refrigerator or her cereal bowl still sitting in the sink, where she'd left it that last morning before the hospital. "Shay, honey, you need to eat something," my mother, Darlene, said, sliding scrambled eggs onto a plate. She'd been cooking since 4 a.m., the way she always handled crisis by feeding people. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but she kept moving, kept busy, kept pretending that staying active could somehow make this bearable. "I can't, Mom." The smell of food made my stomach turn. Every time I try to eat, I remember how Piper couldn't keep anything down those last few days, how she kept apologizing for being sick, like it was her fault. My father Garrett sat in his usual corner chair, silent as stone. He'd barely spoken since I'd called them from the hospital that night, screaming that she was gone, that my baby was gone. He'd driven through the night to get there, but by then it was too late. Now he just sat, staring at nothing, occasionally reaching for his coffee cup only to realize it was empty. Colby hadn't left my side since we arrived yesterday. He clutched his video camera against his chest like armor, that little digital camera I'd saved for 3 months to buy him last Christmas. He and Piper had been inseparable with that thing, making cooking shows where Piper pretended to be a famous chef, action movies where Colby was the hero and Piper the villain who always turned good at the end. Now he just held it, not recording, just holding. "Colby, sweetheart, do you want some juice?" Darlene asked him gently. He shook his head, pressing closer to me on the couch. "Piper liked orange juice," he said quietly. "She said it tasted like sunshine." Everything circled back to her. Every conversation, every thought, every breath reminded us she wasn't here. My brother Tyson arrived next, carrying store-bought cookies because, as he said, I didn't know what else to do. At 29, he was 5 years younger than me, but had always been the level-headed one. While I'd gotten pregnant young and struggled through failed relationships, Tyson had gone to college, started his accounting firm, done everything right. But he loved Piper fiercely, called her his favorite girl, and spoiled her with toys I couldn't afford. "How are you holding up?" he asked, sitting beside me. "Everyone keeps asking me that," I said. "I don't know how to answer. I'm not holding up. I'm just here." The house gradually filled with relatives, each arrival bringing a fresh wave of condolences and casseroles. Aunt Felicia came with her husband, Uncle Roderick, both dressed impeccably as always. Felicia had been my mother's sister who married well. Roderick owned 3 car dealerships, and they never let anyone forget their success. They air-kissed my cheeks and murmured about God's plan, then quickly moved to the corner to whisper with other relatives. I heard fragments of their conversations, not meant for my ears but loud enough anyway. So young to be raising 2 kids alone. The father isn't even coming. Maybe it's for the best, she was so sick. Each word felt like a small cut, but I was too exhausted to bleed. Then Verena arrived. She swept in 45 minutes late because Verena was always late, always making an entrance. Her black designer dress probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her husband Blake followed, ushering their twin boys Harper and Jude, both 10 years old and dressed in matching suits that made them look like miniature executives. "Shay," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "how are you managing?" She didn't hug me. Verena never hugged. She performed concern like an actress, all show for the relatives watching. She'd been competing with me our whole lives, though I'd never understood why. She had everything. The successful husband, the perfect house, the healthy children. Yet she always looked at me with barely concealed contempt, as if my very existence offended her. "Harper, Jude, go sit down," she instructed her boys, who obeyed immediately. They always obeyed. Verena ran her household like a small dictatorship where perfection was the only acceptable option. Blake at least had the decency to look genuinely sad. "I'm sorry about Piper," he said quietly. "She was a sweet kid." "The sweetest," I whispered, and felt Colby's hand slip into mine. The kitchen filled with the sounds of forced normalcy, coffee brewing, hushed conversations, the clink of plates nobody was really eating from. Everyone avoided looking directly at me, like grief might be contagious. Except Verena. She watched me with those calculating eyes, already judging, already finding me lacking. In 2 hours we would bury my daughter. But first we had to endure this gathering, this performance of family support that felt more like a trial, where I was the defendant and everyone else the jury. I didn't know then that Verena would soon pronounce her verdict, or that my 8-year-old son would become my unlikely defender. The funeral service was held at Riverside Memorial Chapel, the same place where we'd held Grandma Ruth's service 5 years ago. Piper had been too young to remember that day, but she'd seen the pictures and always asked why everyone looked so sad. "When I go to heaven," she'd said once, "I want everyone to wear rainbow colors and smile." Instead, here we all were, drowning in black, unable to manage even the smallest smile. The pastor spoke about angels and God's garden, words that should have been comforting but felt hollow. How could God need my 6-year-old daughter more than I did? How could any garden be more beautiful with her light taken from this world? I sat in the front row, Colby pressed against my left side, my parents on my right, trying not to look at the impossibly small white casket covered in pink roses, her favorite flowers. When the pastor invited family members to speak, I couldn't move. I tried to write something the night before, but every word felt inadequate. How do you summarize 6 years of love, of bedtime stories and scraped knees, of first days of school and last goodbyes? Tyson squeezed my shoulder and stood instead, sharing a story about how Piper had once tried to sell him invisible cookies for $100 because invisible things are more expensive since they're magic. A few other relatives shared memories. And then Verena stood up. She hadn't been asked. She simply rose from her pew and walked to the front with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything. Her heels clicked against the floor in rhythm, each step deliberate and measured. She adjusted the microphone and surveyed the room like a prosecutor about to deliver closing arguments. "We're all heartbroken today," she began, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness she used at charity functions. "Losing a child is every parent's worst nightmare. But perhaps, in our grief, we should look for God's wisdom in this tragedy." My mother's hand found mine and squeezed. Something in Verena's tone set off alarm bells in my head. "You see," Verena continued, "God works in mysterious ways. Sometimes he shows mercy in ways we don't immediately understand. Maybe it's God's mercy that some children don't have to grow up." The chapel fell silent. Someone behind me gasped. Even the funeral director looked uncomfortable. "Especially," Verena said, her eyes finding mine, "those children who might struggle with mothers who can barely keep their lives together." "Verena," my father said sharply, half rising from his seat. But she wasn't finished. The mask she'd worn for years was slipping, revealing something ugly underneath. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. My sister could barely hold a job. She's raising these children alone after yet another failed relationship. The father didn't even show up today. What kind of life was that little girl going to have?" "Stop," I managed to say, but my voice came out strangled, weak. "The truth hurts, doesn't it, Shay?" Verena's voice had turned cold. "You were never fit to be a mother. Even that night in the hospital, you couldn't comfort your own daughter properly. I saw you. We all saw you fall apart while that poor baby needed strength. You were hysterical, making everything about yourself as usual." Uncle Roderick, instead of shutting this down, actually nodded. "She has a point." The nurses had to calm Shay down several times. It was quite a scene. "Very inappropriate," Aunt Felicia added, quietly. That poor child needed peace, not drama. I felt like I was drowning. They were talking about the night my daughter died, when I'd held her little hand and begged her to stay with me, when I'd sobbed because I couldn't take her place, couldn't take her pain away. They were turning my grief into evidence of failure. Free from a future of instability, of watching her mother struggle from one crisis to another, one man to another. Blake shifted uncomfortably in his seat but didn't stop his wife. Harper and Jude stared straight ahead, trained to never interrupt their mother's performances. "How dare you?" Tyson said, standing up. "How dare you stand at a child's funeral and attack her grieving mother?" "I'm speaking the truth," Verena replied smoothly. "Something this family has avoided for too long. Shay has been a disaster waiting to happen, and that poor little girl paid the price. She was sick for months while Shay could barely afford proper care, taking her to free clinics, begging for charity. I worked 3 jobs to pay for her treatments. I finally found my voice. I sold everything I owned. I would have sold my soul if it would have saved her. Yes, always so dramatic, Verena said with a dismissive wave. Even now, making this about you. That final night, when Piper needed comfort, you were falling apart in the hallway while strangers had to step in. More murmurs of agreement rippled through the family section. Cousins who'd visited once a year were nodding like they knew anything about my life, about my love for my daughter, about the thousands of nights I'd stayed up with her when she was sick, singing her favorite songs, telling her stories about brave princesses who looked just like her. The weight of their judgment pressed down on me. In my darkest moment, at my daughter's funeral, my own family was tearing me apart. Verena stood there, like an avenging angel, delivering what she clearly thought was justice, while I sat broken and unable to defend myself. That's when I heard the small voice beside me, clear and strong despite everything. "Aunt Verena," Colby said, standing up, still clutching his camera. "Should I play what you did in the hospital room?" The entire chapel turned to look at my 8-year-old son. Colby stood there, all 4 feet of him, facing down a room full of adults who just agreed his mother was a failure. His small hands gripped the video camera steady, though I could see his knees shaking slightly beneath his black dress pants. Verena's face went through a series of transformations in seconds. Confusion, then recognition, then something that looked like panic before she forced a condescending smile. "What are you talking about, sweetheart? You're upset. Why don't you sit down and let the adults handle this?" "I'm talking about what you did when you went into Piper's room alone," Colby said, his voice gaining strength with each word. "When Mom went to get Piper's special blanket from the car, the one with the butterflies that helped her sleep. You went in when nobody else was around." Blake stepped forward from his pew, his forehead creased with confusion. "Verena, what is he talking about?" "The boy is confused," Verena said quickly, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the podium. "Children often create fantasies when dealing with trauma." "I'm not imagining anything," Colby said firmly. "My camera was recording. I'd left it on Piper's bedside table because she liked watching our old videos when she felt scared. The one where we made the fairy garden, that was her favorite. The camera was still on when you came in." The chapel had gone completely silent. Even the funeral director had stopped his discreet shuffling of papers. Every eye moved between Colby and Verena like spectators at a tennis match. "That's impossible," Verena said, but her voice had gone up an octave. "There was no camera in that room. It was behind the teddy bear," Colby explained patiently, like he was talking to someone who didn't understand something simple. "The purple one Mrs. Chen from next door brought. Piper asked me to hide it there because she didn't want the nurses to take it away. She said it made her feel like she was home." My mother stood up slowly. "Verena, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything," Verena snapped, her composed mask cracking. "This is ridiculous. We're at a funeral, and you're all listening to the fantasies of a traumatized child. Then you won't mind if we see the video," Tyson said, moving to stand beside Colby. "If nothing happened, then there's nothing to worry about." "This is highly inappropriate," Uncle Roderick interjected. "The boy is clearly disturbed. Shay should control her son better." "Disturbed?" I stood up, finally finding my voice. "My son just lost his sister. He's been braver than any of us, and now he's trying to tell us something important." Colby looked up at me, and in his eyes I saw something I'd missed in my grief. Determination, purpose. "Mom, I watched it this morning while everyone was getting ready. I needed to see Piper again, to hear her voice, but then I saw what Aunt Verena did." "You're lying," Verena hissed, abandoning all pretense of concern. "You're just like your mother, making up stories for attention." "Piper always said lying makes your heart sick. She said the truth is like medicine, even when it tastes bad." Blake walked over to his wife, studying her face. "Verena, if there's nothing on that video, then let him play it. Put this to rest." "I won't have my reputation destroyed by a child's prank," Verena said, starting to step down from the podium. "What reputation?" Tyson asked. "The one where you're the perfect mother? The perfect sister? Or the one where you just stood at a 6-year-old's funeral and called her mother unfit?" Harper and Jude, Verena's twins, were watching their mother with wide eyes. Harper, the more sensitive of the two, whispered to his brother, "Why is Mom so scared?" That seemed to break something in Blake. "Play the video," he said firmly. "Now." "Blake!" Verena turned on her husband. "You can't actually believe this." "I believe you're terrified," Blake said quietly. "I've seen you angry, dismissive, cold, but I've never seen you scared. Not like this." Colby had already moved to the television mounted on the chapel wall, the one they used for memorial slideshows. He pulled a cable from his pocket, clearly prepared. "I brought the connector," he said. "I knew I might need to show everyone." "Stop him," Verena commanded, but nobody moved. Aunt Felicia spoke up, her voice uncertain now. "Verena, dear, if you didn't do anything wrong, then surely showing the video will clear this up." "You were all agreeing with me 5 minutes ago," Verena said desperately. "You all said Shay was hysterical that night, that she wasn't fit to be a mother." "We said you had a point about her being emotional," my father said, standing for the first time. "But that's a far cry from whatever has you this frightened. What's on that video, Verena?" Colby had connected the camera. The television screen flickered to life, showing a loading symbol. "It's from 3 nights ago," he said, "the 10th of December, at 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes before Piper died." I felt my legs go weak. Tyson caught my arm, steadying me. Whatever was on that video, whatever my son had discovered, was about to change everything. The truth about my daughter's last moments was about to be revealed, and judging by Verena's pale face and trembling hands, it was going to destroy the story she'd been telling. "Please," Verena whispered, but it wasn't clear who she was begging or what she was asking for. Colby pressed play. The television screen came to life, showing Piper's hospital, room in grainy but clear footage. The camera angle captured most of the room from its hidden spot behind the purple teddy bear. There was my baby girl, so small in that big hospital bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed. She was awake but drowsy, her little hands fidgeting with the edge of her blanket the way she always did when she was trying to be brave. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. The door opened and Verena entered, checking over her shoulder before closing it softly behind her. She wasn't wearing the concerned aunt expression she'd shown everyone in the waiting room. Her face was cold, calculating. "Still awake, I see," Verena's recorded voice filled the chapel. She approached Piper's bed slowly, her designer heels clicking against the hospital floor. 6-year-old Piper's weak voice responded, "Aunt V, where's Mommy?" "Your mother is having another one of her breakdowns in the hallway," Verena said, pulling the visitor's chair closer but not sitting, making everything about herself, as usual. "The nurses are probably sick of her dramatics." "Mommy's sad because I'm sick," Piper defended me, her voice small but certain. "She loves me." Verena laughed, but it was an ugly sound. "Love? Your mother doesn't know what Love Island she knows need. She needs attention, needs sympathy, needs everyone to see her as the poor, struggling single mother. And you, sick little thing that you are, you're perfect for that narrative." Gasps echoed through the chapel. Blake's face had gone white. Harper and Jude looked confused and frightened. On the screen, Piper tried to sit up but was too weak. "That's not true. Mommy takes care of me. She sings to me and reads stories and stays up all night when I can't sleep. Because she has to," Verena snapped. "Because what would people say if she didn't? But look where her care got you. Cheap doctors, generic medicines, probably why you're dying in the first place." "Stop it," Piper whimpered. "You're being mean." "You're being mean. I'm being honest. Something this family never island. And honestly, that might be for the best." The chapel erupted in shocked voices, but Colby turned up the volume. "Your mother can barely take care of herself, let alone you and your brother," Verena continued on screen. "My boys, Harper and Jude, they have a future. Private schools, college funds, parents who can actually provide for them. What do you have? A mother who can't keep a job or a man, living in that pathetic apartment pretending that love is enough." Piper started crying, her little chest heaving with the effort. "I want my mommy. Please get my mommy." "Your mommy is weak just like you," Verena said, straightening up. "Both of you, always needing attention, always making everything harder than it needs to be. You know what? Maybe when you die, she'll finally have to grow up. Or maybe she'll fall apart completely. Either way, I won't have to watch her drag this family down anymore. The heart monitor next to Piper's bed started beeping faster, an alarm beginning to sound. Piper was gasping, crying, reaching for the call button but too weak to press it. "Please," Piper sobbed. "Help me. I can't breathe right." Verena stepped back, watching. Just watching. The timestamp showed 11:48, then 11:49. For 2 full minutes she stood there as my baby struggled, as the monitors screamed their warnings. "Maybe if you get worse," Verena said coldly, "they'll finally see what a failure your mother really island. How she couldn't even keep you safe." Only when footsteps could be heard approaching did Verena lunge for the call button, pressing it repeatedly. She grabbed Piper's hand, and her entire demeanor changed. When the door burst open and I rushed in, followed by nurses, Verena was playing the concerned aunt. "Oh, thank God!" Verena's recorded voice cried out. "She just started. I'm having trouble breathing. I pressed the button as soon as I noticed." The video showed me pushing past Verena, gathering Piper in my arms, whispering how sorry I was for leaving, how much I loved her, that Mommy was here now. The medical team swarmed the room. But those 2 minutes Verena had waited, those 2 minutes while my baby cried for help, they had mattered. The last clear image before the camera got knocked over in the chaos was of Verena standing in the corner, watching me sob over my daughter with something that looked like satisfaction on her face. Colby stopped the video. The chapel was tomb silent. Then Aunt Felicia's voice, trembling with horror. "Dear God, Verena, she was a baby. A sick, frightened baby, and you tortured her." Blake had backed away from his wife like she was something poisonous. The doctors said her distress that night caused her rapid decline. They said if she'd stayed calm, she might have had more time. "You killed her," Tyson said, his voice flat and terrible. "Your jealousy and cruelty killed our niece." Her perfect mask hadn't just slipped, it had shattered completely, revealing the monster underneath. "Mommy?" Harper's voice was small and scared. "Why did you say those things to Piper?" That seemed to break Verena from her freeze. "It's not what it looks like," she started, but even she seemed to realize how hollow that sounded. "It's exactly what it looks like," Blake said quietly. "You went into a dying child's room and emotionally tortured her. Then you watched her struggle without helping. And then you lied about it." Uncle Roderick already had his phone out. "I'm calling the police. This is murder, or manslaughter at the very least." But I barely heard any of it. All I could think about was Piper's last moments, how she defended me even while dying, how she'd cried for me while her aunt stood there watching. My baby girl had died, thinking she wasn't loved by everyone, had died in distress that could have been prevented, had died because of one woman's twisted jealousy. The police arrived within 15 minutes, though it felt like hours. Verena had collapsed into a chair, her perfect makeup running in black streams down her face, mumbling incoherently about how it wasn't supposed to happen this way. Blake stood as far from her as the room allowed, holding Harper and Jude, who clung to their father with confusion and fear written across their young faces. "She was jealous," my mother said quietly, breaking the stunned silence while we waited. "She's always been jealous of you, Shay. Even when you had nothing, even when you struggled. You had something she never did." "What could I possibly have that she wanted?" I asked, still trying to process what we'd just witnessed. "Real love," Darlene replied. "Your children adore you. They run to you when they're hurt. They light up when you walk in a room. Harper and Jude, they respect Verena. They obey her, but they don't look at her the way Piper looked at you." The officers took Verena away in handcuffs. She didn't fight or protest, seeming almost catatonic. Blake would later tell me that she'd been in therapy for years for her obsessive competitiveness and narcissistic tendencies, but he'd never imagined she was capable of something like this. Their divorce would be finalized within 6 months, with Blake getting full custody of the boys. But that was all later. In that moment, after the police left, something unexpected happened. One by one, every family member who had nodded along with Verena's cruel words came to me. Uncle Roderick, usually so pompous and distant, had tears in his eyes. "I'm ashamed of myself, Shay. That little girl was lucky to have you. We all saw how you loved her, and we let our own prejudices blind us to what really mattered. Aunt Felicia hugged me for the first time in years, a real hug, not her usual air, kisses. You sold your car to pay for her treatments. You wore the same 3 outfits for a year so she could have what she needed. We saw all that and still judged you for not having more. Can you ever forgive us? My father, who had barely spoken in days, stood up and addressed the room. My daughter Shay is the strongest person I know. She raised 2 beautiful children with more love than most kids get from 2 parents. She worked multiple jobs, never complained, never asked for help even when she needed it. And when Piper got sick, she moved mountains to get her care. I failed her by not saying this sooner, by not standing up to anyone who suggested otherwise. But it was Colby who said what mattered most. He walked over to me, still holding his camera, and looked up with those serious eyes. "Mom, I need to tell you something," Piper said. "What's that, baby?" "The day before she died, when you went to get her ice chips, she told me to record everything. She said someday I'd be a famous director and I should practice, but then she said something else. She said to make sure I recorded the truth about our family, about how we love each other, because some people might try to lie about it later." I pulled him close, this brave little boy who had saved his mother when all seemed lost. She knew? I think she knew Aunt Verena was mean, even if she didn't know how mean. Piper was smart like that. She said you were the best mom in the world, and anyone who couldn't see that was just jealous because their mom didn't love them like you loved us. Later that evening, after the funeral reception that no one really attended, after the chaos and revelations, Colby and I sat in Piper's room at my parents' house. We watched old videos on his camera, the happy ones of Piper dancing, laughing, being the radiant child she'd always been. "Mom," Colby said, "Piper wouldn't want us to be sad forever. I know, baby, but it's okay to be sad for a while. She also wouldn't. I want Aunt Verena to win by making us stop being a family." He was right. In trying to destroy me at my daughter's funeral, Verena had actually done something else entirely. She'd shown my family who I really was, a mother who loved her children more than life itself, and she'd shown them who they had been, people too quick to judge based on circumstances rather than heart. The truth had been revealed not by adults who thought they knew better, but by an 8-year-old boy who understood that love and truth are the strongest weapons against cruelty and lies. Piper was gone, but her legacy lived on in her brother's courage and in the lesson that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful truths. Verena would eventually be charged with involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment. She pled guilty and received 5 years in prison, but that wasn't the real justice. The real justice was that Piper's truth was told, her love for me validated, and her memory preserved not as a victim of a struggling single mother, but as a cherished daughter who knew she was deeply loved until her very last breath. Colby still has that camera. He's in film school now, telling stories about truth and justice and the power of standing up when everyone else sits down. His first documentary was about Piper, titled Sunshine Girl, because she said orange juice tasted like sunshine and Mom looked prettiest in yellow. Every frame was filled with love, just like she asked him to record. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every family has its struggles, but love and truth always find a way to shine through. Comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful, real-life stories that remind us of the strength of the human spirit and the courage of unconditional love. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths.